for our first ASIG member meeting for 2023. We are opening the new year with a really interesting topic. We're very pleased to have Dr. Laurent Duverger, if I'm saying that correctly, join us tonight. We will have a presentation, and then there will be an opportunity for Q&A. If you have any questions, could you please type them into the Q&A box, and then we can sort of work through that. That would be really fantastic. Just before we start the presentation, I just want to give you a quick sneak preview of the events that we have coming up in the next few months. So on the 16th of February, we are having a presentation about badgers and a discussion about badgers and TB. So if you're interested in that, you can register on the CIEEM events page. And also in March, we'll be having our annual members meeting, and that always has a really interesting topic as well. So we are securing a speaker for that, and we hope that you'll be able to join, and you can also register through the CIEEM webpage. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Laurent. He has a wealth of experience in ecological survey, conservation research and management, and he has done surveys on native wildlife in Mauritius, including the endangered Mauritius kestrel and echo parakeet, and also right through to native fauna here in the UK, particularly with a focus on bats. So over recent years, he has been dabbling in drones, and tonight he's going to share some of his work and interests with us. So I'll hand over to you, Laurent, if you would like to share your screen.
Yeah. So where are we? Share screen. Desktop one. There we go. Share. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah,
and we
you can
see
hear me.
your screen.
Okay. So good evening, everybody. When Debbie asked me to do, when we were talking about doing this talk, I thought, well, it'd be an interesting subject to touch on, looking at using drones in ecology, because it's a field which to me offers a lot of potential avenues for useful use of a technology which was originally started basically for warfare, but you know, drones are in use with us now every day, and I'm going to cover some areas of where it's been useful in ecology and what you need to know really to actually plan for good drone surveys. So I'm going to start off by saying thank you to 4 people who've sent me data, which you'll see later on. So Lars van Pay, Alan Putter from University of Exeter, Richard Allwood from America, and Quantum Systems from Germany. They've all sent me some data and said I could use it and present it. So you'll see that in a little while. And what I thought I would do was start with the dry end of things, the legal bits, and hopefully make it juicier as we go along. So we finish off with the examples that I've got to show you before the discussion, which will hopefully help drive the discussion forwards at the end. So we'll go it's roughly 5 parts: legal stuff and commissioning surveys. Then I'll talk a bit about the platforms, a bit about the sensors, a bit about the other equipment you need to think about, and then give you some examples of drones for ecological work. To put you in a picture, my wife and I run a small family-based ecology consultancy, and we've been doing that since 2005. We're based down near Exeter in the West Country, hence why our company is called West Country Drones. And I've been involved in radio control stuff since I was in my teens. And then about 6-7 years ago, I started paying attention to the fact that the drones were getting to a stage where they were becoming very easy to fly. And I started thinking maybe there are opportunities there that we could use for drone surveys or applying to our work. And that's how I got into it. So let's go through the legal stuff. And this is something you need to have a basic understanding of, whether you're providing a drone service to somebody or whether you're commissioning work. And to start off, the Civil Aviation Authority makes a very clear distinction between what they call hobbyists or drone racers and commercial operators. And a commercial operator is somebody who's deemed to be getting some form of earned income from their activity. So if I was to do a job for somebody in return for them doing me a favor, although no money has changed hands, that is deemed earned income, and it's covered by commercial operation. So, and they do that because flying drones is a medium to high risk operation. There is a very well-known video of a chap called Marcel Hirscher, who's a very good skier, who nearly got killed in 2015 by a drone missing him by millimeters in the middle of a race. And in the UK, the CIEEM takes the view that a hobbyist goes generally to the same flying area, which is usually marked up, and they know the risks associated with going to that place on a regular basis. Whereas a commercial operator could be asked to work, let's say, in Exeter one day and in Norfolk the next, and they have to be trained to actually understand how the airspace is divided or allocated for them to be able to fly safely. They have to be able to understand where to go and find what are the risks in the local area and how to palliate to those. Hence why they want people to be trained to be commercial operators. Now, all commercial operators must be trained and licensed. The government has a scheme to register individual pilots as well as operators. So personally, I have a flyer license, and I've also got an operator license. And these are very easy to get from the government, from a .gov website. All the equipment we use has to be labeled with the commercial operator number. And we need to hold a relevant certification. So at the moment, the minimum you can have for a commercial operator is what they call the A2 certificate of competency. There's an old permission called PIFCO, permission for commercial operation, which was in vogue for a number of years, but the last one of those will terminate at the end of December. But that's now been replaced by the GVC, the General Visual Line of Sight Certificate, which started in 2021 and is going forward from there on. So if you employ somebody, they must have at least an A2 COC. In most cases in the UK, people will operate in the visual line of sight category. So that's talking about flying no more than 500 meters from an operator and no more than 400 feet in altitude above ground level. There are other categories which extend that range, but you need additional training and you need to prove that you can operate safely in the VLOS category before the CAA will allow you to move up to the higher categories. And my recommendation is that if you're commissioning work, you need to check the credentials of the people you employ. I mean, on top of these, they need to be insured, and generally they won't be allowed to be insured unless they got a certificate. So it's a bit of a round robin system, which makes sure that people have a insurance to work, and to have insurance, they have to be licensed. But it's if you're somebody who's going to employ a drone pilot, you need to know these things so that you know what to check. Right, so that's the dry stuff out of the way, and we can discuss it later if people have got questions. Let's talk a little bit about platforms. There are two main types of platforms, generally multicopters. So these are machines with 4 or more propellers, or fixed wing platforms. Most, if not all of the multicopters these days are GPS stabilized. And the market is really dominated by the Chinese company DJI. They produce, the two I've got at the top of the slide there are a Mavic 2 Pro, which is on the left-hand side with a red background. And the white drone is a Phantom 4 Pro, I think. The fixed wing platforms in this country tend to be dominated by a drone known as a Wingtra, or the Quantum Systems and EB have also got some traction in this country. The main difference between these types of platforms are flight duration and area coverage. The quadcopters, so the current quadcopters like a Mavic 3, is said to be able to fly for more than 40 minutes, which means it'll give you a good 30 minutes of operational time, plus a little bit of safety to actually land once your battery's getting weaker. A fixed wing platform can fly easily an hour, in some cases 2 hours at a time. And in terms of area coverage, because the quadcopters are getting better in terms of their capacity to fly, the Mavic 3 now is said to be able to cover 2 square kilometers. That's 200 hectares per flight in terms of land coverage, which has meant that in my case, and you'll see my setup later, I have a fixed wing plane, which I've barely used now for 2 years because I can do most of my work with my quadcopter. Now, the two main configurations in which drones are set up is either in what's called a flying sensor. So that's one platform with 1 and up to 3 integrated sensors within the platform that you can't change. Or they're a platform and payload system, so which is a platform with multiple replaceable sensors. And I've illustrated 2 versions of a Matrix 300. That's a DJI drone, quite a big job. But in the top picture, it has a thermal camera and a zoom camera hung underneath the platform. Whereas in the bottom shot, it has a visual camera mounted on top of the platform. And for example, that would be really useful for surveying bridges and anywhere where you can fly under something. You can point the camera immediately above your head. No, I've just gone one more. And after the ones I've just described are the sort of drones that most people will come across most of the time. But there are a plethora of specialized and custom platforms. And this slide just illustrates some of them. Wildlife drones in Australia have got a drone specifically targeted at radio tracking. The New Zealanders use baiting drones to get rid of pest species. You've got a number of spraying drones, and there's a company in Northumberland who are developing a spraying drone in this country currently. There are a number of seeding drones, so for reseeding forests in dangerous landscapes, etc. There is a good potential for that. And there are even drones. There is a particular drone known as the Snotbot, which is used to gather health data on whales by flying through the exhale plume of whales and collecting the excreta onto agar jelly plates and that sort of stuff. So these are specialist areas where drones have been put to good use. This is a photo of my current fleet. There are 2 very old 3D robotics platform against the windscreen of a car. The little hub stands are just for keeping my hand in, for playing and just sort of, keeping in trim in terms of flying. I run 2 Mavic 2 Pros, 2 Mavic 2s, a Pro and a Zoom. Their flight time is around 32-33 minutes, which gives me about 20 to 25 minutes of operation time, 20 minutes generally, after which I really want to try and come down so that I don't run a risk of crashing. And at the very bottom of the picture is a fixed wing, which I bought from America called an E384 by the company Event 38. I was hoping to be able to use that a lot more than I have, so it's not been a great purchase, but it's mainly a function of the size of sites that I work on, which I can now cover with the quadcopters. So at the moment, it's a bit redundant in my setup. Now, flying with GPS-enabled systems has really facilitated being able to fly easily. In the old days, you had to literally fly by the seat of your pants a lot of the time, whereas with GPS systems, it's made the platforms much more stable and much easier to control, which means that really where the interesting thing for me is where sensors are going. And now all the machines that I've shown you so far run broadband red, green, blue camera or video sensors as a basic recording device. So standard RGB broadband sensors are the most common type likely to be encountered. They have a broad red, green, and blue response curve, which means that based on the sort of central peak reception color, they will also pick up changes in intensity from 50 to 75 nanometers each side of their peak detection value. There's a lot of overlap, as you can see from a little graph on the right. There's a lot of overlap between the sensors, and you cannot get a true value for any of the sensor readings because a change in one sensor or one color band often affects two or more sensors, which can be an issue for data collection. So generally, they're very good for high quality video and high quality photography, but not much else in that sense. But they're excellent for things like pre-survey recon, site documentation, and progress of works. There is at least one reported project by Baker Shepherd's Gillespie where they did cliff photography to complement some rope access work at a site they were working at, which was very successful. With Kestrel Wildlife is the company that my wife and I run together, and we've been testing various road options for one of our clients by fly-through videos or on site to actually give an idea of what would look better from certain viewpoints on one of the big sites near Bath. So for that sort of work, they're excellent. But also you can get narrow band multispectral imagery, and that is where each band, so the blue, green, red edge, and near infrared, the sensors recording those values only pick up 5 to 8 nanometers each side of their peak sensitivity point, which means that when you have a change in the blue color reflected from a surface, for example, you get a true value from the blue sensor without affecting the green or the red. So they are very good for collecting multispectral data. So the sort of data that satellites collect is now becoming available to the drone operator. And so sort of they've got a narrow bandwidth, and the location of the sampling bands are often adjusted to avoid the regions affected by atmospheric absorption by water, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. They come in a number of layouts, and the way the light paths are separated out. And just to give you an idea of why narrowband and broadband are important, this slide shows you the change in reflectance from healthy plants and in stressed plants, and you'll see that in the region called the red edge. So it's between red and near infrared. A stressed plant reflects a lot more light than a healthy plant. And the same graph is in the top right corner with a narrowband red sensor overlaid over it, as well as a broadband sensor. And you can see that if you were to measure the light value, the reflectance value with a broadband sensor, you would see no difference between a stressed plant and a healthy plant, whereas a narrowband sensor allows you to get very different values, which you can then use in plant indices and that sort of stuff. And narrowband spectral bands, they allow for the production of plant indices like normalized difference vegetation index, to monitor crop health, drought stress, the effect of chemical inputs. They allow for the classification and characterization of land cover, land use, and habitats, and monitoring things like pest and invasive species, algal blooms, etc. And nowadays, there are companies like MicroSense whose sensor range actually match that of satellites. So in this one, it's just showing that there are three sensors that you can choose from. There are two sensors that you can choose from, closely match what the data you can get from Landsat 8 and Sentinel-2A, which means that you can look at a photograph taken at the macro scale by a satellite, which would generally not give you a cell less than 10 by 10 meters, but also then look at it on the micro scale, so going down to the sort of centimeter scale with a drone, and be confident that you're, once you've done your calibration, that the values you're getting are corrected for and applicable or comparable to the satellite data. There are other specialized sensors that you can put on drones. LiDAR is probably one of the better ones, but you can also have magnetometers, ground penetrating radar, gas samplers, and for aquatic applications, there are now water sampling drones, bathymetric drones, and drones using side scanning radar, which are all options, which are becoming available, although it's at a price. Okay. Briefly, I'm just going to cover what other equipment considerations you need to think of when you're using drones. One is your GPS system. There are three basic GPS types in drones. Your standard grade GPS, which is the sort of the drone that I use, has a plus or minus 3 meters accuracy. You can then go to the real-time, the RTK or the PPK type of GPS. Those will get you down to an accuracy of plus or minus 15 millimeters in some cases. And RTK drones, those which are equipped to run RTK, generally have a little additional antenna, which is under the little top hat circled in red on the drone on the right-hand side. There are two shutter types, which are generally in use. One is a global shutter, which exposes all the sensor in one go on a drone. The other one is a rolling shutter, which exposes each row of pixels one at a time. Rolling shutters can give you problems because the drone is moving while the sensor is being exposed, which means that straight edges can be reproduced as curves, and you need to correct for that. And finally, you've got to think of two pieces of software at least when you're operating a drone. One is the software to fly the drone, and that usually comes with the platform, although you can get third-party software which you can apply to your drone. But the other one is the software you need to collect the data, analyze it, and interpret it. And in that latter group, it tends to be things like Pix4D is one of the most commonly used platforms. I also use something called Correlator 3D. And then you've got other companies like Agisoft, Bentley, and AgEagle who all have their various bits of software that you can tap into if that's the software you have to use. Right, so thinking about examples of use of drones for ecological work, where would drones be useful in ecology? Well, everywhere you can gather better information, you can increase your safety, you can decrease your costs, you can save time, or you can combine some or all of the above. And on top of that, with the advent of new systems that are coming in, there are new docked drone systems that are gradually coming onto the market. You could actually have a drone based on-site, operated remotely, which would mean that you would need less time to travel to sites. It'll keep your carbon footprint down, etc. In general, even a basic RGB broadband sensor will enable you to do all of the items listed here. Direct site documentation, including scouting of projects, building surveys, including imagery of complex roof systems, etc. It'll allow you to document potential roosting features for me, for my bat work. It allows you to do site progress follow-ups and fly-throughs, and it allows you to map vegetation and landscape features. Also allows you to do photogrammetry, which is stitching of multiple photographs to produce 2 and 3D models and reconstructions of land surfaces, buildings, structures, digital elevation models, digital terrain models, and their follow-up interpretation. And on top of that, with the advent of computer learning, both video and photo outputs can be analyzed through AI or machine learning protocols and algorithms to automate the counting of things in terms of, for example, in agriculture, it'll be oil palm tree crowns, lettuces, crop weeds. In wildlife applications, there are reports and papers on counting penguins, seals, breeding birds, orangutans, chimps. So it can be a great time saver in that sense. So I've got 7 examples of me and other people using drones in ecology. I'll start with my stuff, which tends to be, a lot of it is just basic site photography. This is at roughly the same scale, the best image I can. This is my workshop and barn, about a quarter of a mile from where I'm sitting at the moment. On the left is the best drone photograph I can get of it. Sorry, on the left is the best Google photograph I can get of it before it gets too pixelated to be of any use. And on the right is a very basic drone photograph that I took of it to get roughly the same building size, etc. I can blow up the photo on the right to the point where I can actually see roughly 1/2 to 3/4 inch items measuring 1/2 to 3/4 inch in diameter quite easily, whereas the picture on the left is absolutely useless. So I tend to use my drone a lot now for producing data for my reports, site plans, illustrating bat features and that sort of stuff. Oh, good. Next one. Right. Again, this is another example of basic documentation. This was sent to me by Lars van Page after a snowstorm in the Netherlands. He just went out, realized that he'd been looking for crossing points for badgers in some of the areas he was working, and he literally just put a drone up and in a matter of minutes covered such an area that he was able to identify key crossing points for the badgers that they had to protect when they were going to do some levee works in Holland. This is, again, basic documentation and basic post-processing. This was sent to me by Alan Puttock. It's a site where beavers were released, and they use drones to monitor the gradual expansion of the habitat affected and changed and modified by the badgers, both in terms of aerial photography, but then in terms of mapping the amount of standing water, etc. So you'll see that the picture on the right-hand side is turned upside down, but that's so that all the ponds line up with those on the left-hand side. But this is very basic work, which would be very difficult and time-consuming to do if you were to walk around each pond with a surveyor's stick, effectively. Richard Allwood sent me some photos of work he's doing in America on mule deer habitat, and he's using a very simple drone, but using photogrammetric systems, procedures to actually reconstruct in 3D the landscape of areas where they're restoring mule deer habitat in Colorado. So they go around and take pictures which are what look like on the right-hand side, just basic top-down photographs. But by reconstructing them, they can build up three-dimensional models, which he then puts through a GIS and colorizes in terms of height. And what they can then do is sample that to work out the proportion of bushes, scrub, trees, etc. that they've got on a piece of land. And as they are managing it, they can repeat the process on a regular basis and actually compare how the habitat is changing. And more advanced sensors, I mean, these were just taken with broadband RGB sensors, but more advanced sensors can do much, much more. So this is an extract taken from Natalie Petorelli's work, book on normalized difference vegetation index. In this particular case, you can look at the absolute reflectance values of different materials and separate them into, for example, asphalt, water, healthy and stressed vegetation. So you can actually use the reflectance values to differentiate different types of terrain. And the last two examples are from Quantum in Germany. They used Micasense sensors flown on their plane, and using the various indices, they're able to colorize large areas. In this case, it was 152 hectares in 2 minutes, but I think the whole area shown is about 700 hectares, mapped out in different and representing different vegetation, different types of cultivation. And in the bottom right-hand corner, even different types of trees between the lakes. You can see that they've got the trees have got very different reflectance values shown as bright red and dull red, and the canopy differentiation would be classifiable post ground truthing. Once they know what species is giving the bright red, they could actually separate that and say, well, there's X percentage of this species of trees and Y percentage of that one. The other thing that they did with the multispectral sensors in this case is they looked at algal blooms in those various lakes, and they were able to quantify how the algal blooms came and went over a summer across different lakes. And that is important in this particular case because some of the lakes are bathing beaches, and obviously they don't want children to be able to get sick, etc., by drinking water that's got too many too much algae in it and that sort of stuff. So one thing I haven't touched on is thermal sensors. There are 2 or 3 very good thermal drones on the market, but I don't have any particular hands-on experience of them at the moment, but they've been adapted from the industrial inspection sector, and they work very much like handheld units. They give a range of color palettes, and at the moment the best resolution which is available is 640 by 512 with 30 hertz refresh rate. So they're comparable to handheld systems. And you can get them in both a platform and payload setup or as a flying sensor. So that's a sensor attached to one drone that you can't swap out effectively. The disadvantage of thermal sensors at the moment is their cost. The lowest one of good quality is around £5,000, maybe £6,000 at the moment. So it's something which is coming. And it has been used abroad on a number of projects and in Scotland. I'll cover James Bunyan's work in a minute. So, I mean, in the US, I know it's been used for rangelands nest surveys of birds and surveys of game bird coveys, surveys for deer, bear, and goats. Wildlife drones have used theirs to do koala surveys post fires. James Bunyan from Tracks Ecology up in Scotland, I've seen his work last year and he was already doing deer and seal surveys in Scotland very successfully. And I know in this country, there's a deer project by the Game Conservancy coming up in Wales, and a friend of mine is involved with thermal surveys of reed lemurs in Madagascar. So they can be very, very useful, but the equipment costs quite a lot of money, a lot more than your standard drone. And my one caveat is that a lot of people think, if you look at Hollywood films, you sort of see thermal images through glass, etc. Thermal cameras cannot see through walls, and wildlife drones reported on a Bitten study where they could not find, it was useless at finding nests once the vegetation was above 3 meters. And what they ended up doing was finding birds on the edge of reed beds and then using high quality RGB, red, green, blue cameras to actually find the nests. So having seen some of the examples of what can be done, you may ask yourself, is it for me? And to answer that, I would say there are 4 points you need to consider. One is, what's the information you're after? What outputs do you require? What resolution do you need? And what level of GPS and accuracy do you need? And that will drive, will inform you, or will help you determine the sensors you need, the platforms you need, how you need to collect the data, what software you need to use for interpretation, how much post-processing is necessary, and ultimately the total costs of a project. So to answer my first question, my first slide, can drones be useful in ecology and environmental work? Emphatically, yes, it is for me. But you need to match the right tool to the right job in the right place. So, I've gone a bit longer probably than Debbie intended, but if you think it's up to, my question to you is, do you think drones could be useful for or in your work? I'm happy to discuss it. You got my contact details, and so has Debbie. I have a resource list. If anybody wants a copy of that, get in touch by email. And if you want to chat about anything off forum, contact me by email and we'll touch base. So I'll end the share now, if that's okay. Where have you gone? No, come off. So I'll stop my share. Okay. Is that okay?
Thank you very much.
Can I hear? Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, no problems. Sorry, it's gone a bit longer than I thought, but I hope I covered enough grounds for people.
Oh, that's no problem. It was extremely interesting. Thank you. And I can see the questions coming now.
Okay.
in the Q&A.
Yeah, I'll open that up actually. Okay, yeah.
Fabulous. How is it easiest for us to do this? Do you want to just have a look through that, or?
Well, shall I take it from the top? And
yes, that would be great.
Right. So Carola Hoskins, licensing body, needs to get the registration. Suggesting I need to. So I'm reading Carola Hoskins. Been going backwards and forwards with the insurer and the licensing body. One suggesting I need the insurance to get the registration, and the other one suggesting I need the registration to get the insurance. Which is it, please? I got my registration, and I only buy insurance on a job-by-job basis. So as far as I'm concerned, you should be able to get registered as a flyer and registered as an operator, which I just did just before Christmas, about the 18th of December. I just redid all my registrations, and they never asked me for insurance. And I buy insurance on a job-by-job basis. So I'm not always covered. If I'm not flying, I don't see the point in being covered for the sort of work I'm doing. Is that okay? Do you need an A2CFC for less than 250 gram aircraft, such as a Mavic Mini 2? Technically, no. You don't. Anything under 250 grams, you don't necessarily need anything to fly it all over the categories are set up based on the weight of the platform you fly and the likely risk of danger. So if you fly in a crowded area, and if you fly compared to flying out in the sticks, you may have, depending on the machine you fly, you may have different levels of necessary qualifications. But to get the insurance, you need to have some form of training. So the A2C of C for a commercial operator is the basic one that you can go to. And I'm not sure you would get insurance without that, even for a Mini. Does that make sense? Can I hear anybody?
Yeah, you're still there. You're still there.
Yeah, you're still there. Okay. So that's anonymous attendee. That was that one. John 1. So can drones differentiate between 3 species of the same genus? The drones can't, but the sensors, depending on which sensor you use, yes, you can. So it would mean having to go to one of the higher end narrowband color spectrum sensors. So depends on how much you need to, but yes, you can. There are algorithms that will do it, but you will be spending at least £5,000 on a multispectral sensor to actually get to be able to do that. Right, how much disturbance can drones cause? So this is anonymous attendee. How much disturbance can the drones cause, sound and downdraft? Regarding bat emergence surveys, right? I've seen loads and loads of videos of people actually flying drones within clouds of exiting bats. So I don't think it's necessarily the noise and the downdraft that's going to be the issue, provided you stay a reasonable distance away. Sorry, what's likely to be a problem or a potential risk is collisions with flying bats. So where in America, the videos that I've seen in America of people doing that, they all fly with a bump cage. I don't know if the person involved who's asked the question understands that, but it's a cage that sits on the complete outside of your drone. So I've got a drone here, and if I opened it up, it would have the legs sticking out and whatever. And you get a cage that actually envelopes the whole of that and basically prevents the bats from hitting the propellers. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, Charlotte Alanine. Oh, hang on, Charlotte. How much would a simple quad drone cost approximately? On the second-hand market, one good enough to record photo and video of site to form ecological baselines. Depends on where you want to go. On the second-hand market, you can get Mavic 2s and Mavic 2 Minis for a few £100s. The latest, my recommendation probably would be to go to the latest Mavic 3 Mini, which costs, I think that the baseline version is around £350, £400. I'm not exactly sure, but it's that sort of figure. And that should be good enough to get you going. If you have the money, I would go for the Mavic Mini 3 Pro, which is about £800, something like that, because that has it will fly for 40 minutes, so which means it'll give you 30 minutes of operation time. It has a 48 megapixel camera, so it's really the very good for the money. I hope that's answered that. If you're going to work, so second part of Charlotte Alanine's question, She works in ecological consultancy, and drones would be useful to gather baseline information on large sites or long linear projects. Just bear in mind this thing about your basic license will be for 500 meters. So you shouldn't, and you need to be able to see your drone. So if you go for something that's too small, after 200 or 300 yards, I would be prepared to wager you won't be able to see the drone itself. So you might have to move every 300 meters or something like that. But just bear that in mind. Right, what is the greatest risk to the wider use of drones? Is it, so this is anonymous attendee. What's the greatest risk to wider use of drones? Is it people's concerns over privacy, cost, lack of expertise? It's a little bit of everything. The training you get actually establishes the flying conditions that you should maintain to stay away from people. Privacy is obviously an issue. You're not meant to be flying over people's houses and taking photographs of them, etc. But for the sort of work that I do and the people I know who work in the wild do, generally it's not too much of an issue because we're out in the sticks, really. So you got far less people, far less housing to matter. Is a lot of the time it's working on green fields or rough ground, you know, so privacy is not too much of an issue. Cost is really not, you know, when I think of cost, I sort of think in my world, which is back work, a decent back detector is 250, 300, 400 quid, something like a wildlife acoustic EMT2, but, you know, you put on your phone. If you cost in the cost of your phone, that's another 500 quid. So you're looking at sort of between 500 and £1,000 for a basic bat detector. Every bit of equipment that you use is £1,000, £1,500. In the cupboards, you know, just to the left of me here, you know, there's probably 30,000 quid's worth of equipment that we've acquired over the years just to actually do our ecological work. So when I sort of think of a drone, that sort of, you know, I've got two of these. So they were 1,200. The first one was £1,200 and the next one was about £900. As don't balk too much at the idea because it's the sort of money that I have to pay for using good equipment anyway. Lack of expertise is definitely an issue, but as I said, these are now GPS stabilized. You know, if the old drones like the 3D robotics and stuff, you know, if you didn't pilot them, they crashed. These ones, if you panic, you take your thumbs off the sticks and it stops and it just sits there hovering, waiting for you to do your input. So you don't crash those as much. And expertise you just get by going out and flying, you know, and I would say little and often more than thinking I'm going to spend half a day flying, because I find even though I now fly regularly, I find that after one and a half hours flying, I am totally toast. My brain is absolutely, you know, scrambled, because you have to keep everything into consideration. You have to keep look out for the weather. You've got to keep an eye on any potential risks. You have to keep on top of what the drone's doing, what information you're getting. And after that sort of flying, so 3 batteries for me is about my top. I do that and then I have decent break and then I start again. So you're probably better off, if you're going to do drone work, actually going out and flying half an hour a day, and very, very quickly you get adept at it. It's not much of a problem.
Sorry, I'm just going to interject very quickly. We had a quick comment from Paul, who's I've just invited into the chat because he's just sent in a reminder that he leads a CIEEM drone training course. So just wanted to very quickly mention that. Paul, just over to you give you 1 minute, Paul. Sorry for a quick one.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thanks very much. I wonder if we've met, Laurent. Not sure.
Did you do the course at Richmond?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought I recognized
we met there last year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to plug that course. It was a
good one, well worth it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so the course is a 1-day course which covers some of what Laurent's covered anyway, but we also do a bit of a demo as well. So if anyone's interested in that, yeah, you're welcome to come along. It hasn't actually been programmed in just yet, but what I would like to do is to contact you offline, Laurent, perhaps discuss drones. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, more than happy, Paul. Yeah, it's no problem at all. The more the merrier, I think.
Great. Yeah, my interest is a little bit different from Laurent's. You're mainly doing bat work. My main interest is in habitat mapping and surveying. So
yeah.
I'm interested in the producing the orthomosaic side of things. That's my main thing, really. So it'd be great to discuss some of that at some point.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Great. Thank you. Sorry to barge in.
No problems.
Right.
Shall I, there's a comment here from Lindsay McKinley. And he or she, I'm not sure, sorry if I get the wrong sex, but mentions that Ben Harrower has just used a thermal drone for counting roe and red deer on their land in Scotland. Game changer for deer counts, especially with roe deer. Totally agree. Deer are one of my passions. And it's certainly one area that I'm going to be targeting. Large ungulates, wild boar, and that sort of stuff are an area which I want to take a drone, a thermal drone to do. The reason I haven't pulled the trigger on a thermal drone is that in the bat world, we have something called, we have a new recommendation that came out last year called the night visual aids to help in bat surveys. And it recommends having either an infrared setup to count bats or a thermal setup or a combination of both. We personally have already got an infrared setup and I want to move to a thermal setup. And I'm at the moment assessing the costs of whether to go for a handheld unit or a drone unit. And I'd prefer to, given that the costs are very similar, I'd prefer to go for a flying unit that I can use handheld, but I also have to check that all the specs are correct. So that's why I'm not yet punting for a thermal drone, but I totally agree, they're phenomenal machines. And the work that I pointed to from the gentleman from Trax earlier on was really great to see the difference in visual and then thermal of the same scene, and actually seeing the number of deer you would have missed in the visual camera compared to the drone was quite amazing. Other than licensing and insurance, what permissions would be required to fly drones, landowner council, etc.? That's from Charlotte Alanin. Well, ideally, you need a permission from the landowner you're operating on. But generally with us, our clients want us to use the drones, so we're not in too much of a pickle from that point of view. But yeah, you know, it's better to have permission than to annoy somebody and then nobody gets permission to fly. Are automatic classification systems able to separate out habitat mosaics? Yes, they are, but there are various algorithms that you may need to apply to your data. And it's going to apply primarily for drones where you can use the narrowband sensors. So again, it's an expensive end of the market. You know, you've got to be able to justify that. But I can see where it would be actually really useful on large areas, because I've seen work done in the Arctic and that sort of stuff on classifying habitats, which I know would cost a lot more money by doing it by hand. So there's a lot of ground truthing involved. There's a lot of background stuff that you need to correct for, but it's definitely a viable proposition. How much does drone insurance cost? It's all based on where you're flying, the risks involved. So if you're near an airport, it might be much more expensive than if you're out in the sticks. The length you need it for, the equipment you're using, etc. So it's not a one price fits all. Drones as a
just
threat. Is
come in
there
again.
research into what? This is from Lexi. Drones as a threat. Is there research into whether use of drones disturb wildlife such as nesting birds? Yes, there is. It's the stuff I've seen is primarily from America, and it primarily involves birds of prey who are quite defensive of their nesting areas.
Sorry, Ren, just to come in again quickly, I hope you can hear me.
Sorry?
So yeah, just to let you know, it's 7 o'clock now, so it's kind of the end of the allotted webinar time. However, obviously the feedback to the questions you're giving is amazing and really useful. So I don't want to keep you all night, but if you do want to continue, that's really appreciated.
I'm quite happy to. If
that's
people are
fab.
happy
it's not going to cut off at any point, so that's fab. Fine. But I just want to use this opportunity as well to say from myself at CIEEM, thank you very much for doing this webinar. It's been really interesting.
It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
ASIG as well. I'm sure Sean would echo that.
No
yes,
problems. I mean, are you happy for me to carry on with these questions? And
yeah, Lauren, if you're happy to go a little bit longer, maybe another 5 minutes or so. We don't want to keep you too long. And to everyone who has joined tonight, thank you very much. If some of you need to go, we understand. Thank you for all your questions. And if there are some that we don't get to, we can try to see if we can put some a little bit of information together in our ASIG newsletter. So keep your eyes open for that.
So if you wanted to send me the questions we can't answer, I'd be happy to write, a few notes on it and send it back to you.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
That's no problem. No problem. Okay, well, let's just tackle a few more. Right. Do you apply for formal permission assent when flying drones in designated sites such as SSSIs? Not necessarily. It's, I'm very aware of what I'm trying to do. And if I think there is a risk to wildlife, then that takes precedence. Generally, just because a site is designated doesn't mean that you can't fly there. Where would collaborative voluntary projects fall in the legal sense? I'm not sure, Nick. I think provided that you respect the flying conditions in terms of getting permission to flying away from people, or at least the minimum distance from people, and you're not being a pain in the backside of somebody else. I don't think there should be any problems. I mean, obviously, the person who would be doing the flying needs to have a flyer certificate. The person operating the drone needs to have, or who's in charge of a project would need to have an operator certificate. And I think provided that you use best practice, there shouldn't be a problem. Software for joining images together. This is anonymous attendee. All of the big programs do it. So Pix4D, Agisoft, Bentley, Correlator 3D, AgEagle, they all will stitch pictures for different reasons in different ways. So it's, again, you need to have an idea of what you want to do. Generally, if you're doing stuff which is agriculture based, you can stitch on a 2D on a piece of software that will give you a 2D or a plan rendition. I prefer to use Pix4D Mapper, which allows you to get height as well. So you're stitching in 3 dimensions, so you can get elevation models as well out of it. Right, with regard to sub 250 grams, so this is Alex Sams. I understand you don't need A2C for this usage. Is this correct? When I did my training course, although the machine is under 250 grams, my insurer was saying you need to do at least an A2C because you're a commercial operator. So if you're not a commercial operator, yes, you can get away with not having to do an A2C. So you have to you have to weigh up what it is, where you're operating. Are you a hobbyist? Are you just doing it, I don't know, for the odd photograph? But even then, if it goes in a report and a report earns you money, that could be deemed earned income. So for me, anything that involves work, I would do at least an A2CFC. That's all I can say, really. Right, this is Nick Mead, possibly stupid question, but no-fly zone in Exeter extends close to the city centre. With drones used, is that a complete no, or can you fly up a certain altitude with drones? But check for tree health like ash dieback and monitor on an ongoing basis. Right. Yes, in terms of flying in, for example, in Exeter, most of that would fall under the crowded category. So you may be able to fly if you have enough experience and you've demonstrated that you're a safe flyer and your company has protocols that allow you to fly in crowded areas. Because the CAA will do exemptions for crowded areas, as every day we see drone shots taken in towns, etc. But it's not for the basic flyers. You know, when you start off, it's baby steps. You start at the bottom of the ladder. You would need to do your A2CFC, then your GVC, and then apply to fly in more crowded areas, etc. So it's a no-fly zone that applies as a broad umbrella to actually stop people who are not experienced enough doing things they shouldn't be doing. Tree canopy cover, yes, you can check for tree health, use like ash dieback and monitor on an ongoing basis. Yes, you can. The multispectral sensors with the right algorithm can separate out, for example, infected larch from normal larch, infected oak from normal oak. I suspect somebody will have tried to do ash dieback, you know, at early stages compared to a normal ash tree. I haven't seen anything on it. Shall we stop there and then take the rest of the questions?
That sounds like a great idea.
Okay,
Thank you so much for going through all those questions.
That's no problem.
And apologies to those who didn't get around to.
Yeah, I mean, I hope people get information and it generates interest. You know, that's the whole point.
I'm sure it will. And it's been a really great turnout, a really interesting topic. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. I'm sure everybody's really appreciative. Debbie, did you want to say anything before we wrap up?
I've just put a note in the chat to say that we can definitely put Laurent's resource list in the next newsletter. So Laurent, if you send that to me, I'll add it into the newsletter, which might be helpful, and we'll also do a short summary. Sean, we can save all the questions, can't we?
I think so. Maybe Drew might be able to help us with that.
I've just copied.
Yeah, I mean,
I've just copied all of the questions that are unanswered and put them into a Word document, so they're safe.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I think there may be a problem replying to them individually because we don't have the contact details because of GDPR.
What we can do for all of the questions, if we answer them in one, when we send the recording round, when that's ready, we can send around that as an additional note as well. So your questions will be answered in there.
Probably with the names taken off, so it would just be the questions and Laurent's brief response. If you're willing to do that, Laurent, because that's quite a bit of additional work. But
it's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine.
Great. So yes, that's all I want to say, and thank you very much.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about deer management.
Yes, next topic.
At another point.
Let's touch base. Yes, let me recover from this one.
Okay, right. So numbers have dropped off quite a lot, Sean. So I think that's indicative of the fact that we probably should finish.
Great. Well, thank you again, Laurent, and thank you everyone for joining. and we will sort out some answers to some of those other questions. So good night, and yeah, have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See you
Take
at the
care.
next event.
Yes.
All right.
February.
Badges next month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.